Good evening and welcome to the Township of Woolwich Council meeting on May 16th, 2022. We are now live on YouTube. I'll start with a roll call of council. I'm Mayor Shantz. I'm present and chairing this meeting. Councillor Martin.
Present.
Councillor McMillan.
Present.
Councillor Merlehan.
Present.
Councillor Redekop.
Present.
And Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Thank you. Can I get a motion that council reconvenes in open session, please? Moved by Councillor Shantz and seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Before we begin our meeting, I want to first acknowledge that tomorrow is International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia. It was created in 2004 to draw attention to the violence and discrimination experienced by all people with diverse sexual orientations, gender identities, or expressions. Excuse me. May 17th was chosen to commemorate World Health Organization's decision in 1990 to declassify homosexuality as a mental disorder. I had a hard time hearing that until 1990, homosexuality was classified as a mental disorder. And you know, we all sit on a spectrum of some sort or other. For reasons that would take way too long to articulate, we seem to need to see the world in black and white, binary and non-binary, right and wrong. And too often, we label others in order to secure our own position, whatever that may be. In truth, we are all so much more alike than we are different. So tonight I want to say to you, we are all in this journey together. We all bring our own set of gifts and talents. Whatever your sexual orientation or gender identity, you have an important part to play in creating our community. We welcome your wisdom, your gifts, and your insights. Let's start with a moment of silence, please. Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge that the land on which we meet has been here from time immemorial. People have inhabited southern Ontario for about 10,000 years, and we acknowledge the Attawandaron, also called the Neutral people, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee peoples who lived here when settlers arrived and who share this land with us. May we together learn to care for and respect each other, our flora and fauna, and the land we inhabit together. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening? Councillor Merlehan?
Yeah, I have on the appointment to the St. Jacobs BIA board, the BIA is a client.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. We have two items to come forward from closed. And the first one would be the one that Councillor Merlehan has a conflict on. The motion from closed is that the Council of the Township of Woolwich, considering report C02-2022, respecting an appointment to the St. Jacobs Business Improvement Area, appoint Dan Vandermolen to the board for a term ending December 31st, 2022. Moved by Councillor Redekop, seconded by Councillor Shantz. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Come on back. There we are. And a mover and a seconder that the Council of the Township of Woolwich, considering report C11-2022, respecting an appointment to the Woolwich Heritage Committee, appoint Colleen Willard Holt to the committee for a term ending December 31st, 2022. Moved by Councillor Merlehan and seconded by Councillor McMillan. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We have, get my notes straightened out here. We have minutes from Council of April 25th, 2022. Can I have a motion that the minutes be adopted as presented, please? Councillor Redekop, seconded by Councillor McMillan. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Following portion of the meeting is for information only, and no decisions will be made tonight. Any questions can be directed to Development Services staff following the meeting. I declare the planning public meeting to be open. So the item is information report on Riverland Area 2, and I will call on our Director of Infrastructure Services, Deanne Fries, to provide an overview. Ms. Fries. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So we have a public meeting today for a proposed plan of subdivision with a maximum of 130 units. These would be consisting of 46 townhouses, 84 detached homes, a school block, a park block, and a wetland block. The property is 10.62 hectares inside and is located north of the future Ottawa Street extension and west of Woolwich Street. As well, we have the consultant here, Amanda, who is able to provide some more information and respond to any questions that council may have.
Okay, thank you. Are there any, thanks. Are there any questions for Ms. Fries? Councillor Shantz, go ahead.
Thank you, through you to Ms. Fries. Back in September, I believe we did a boundary expansion, and I'm wondering whether this affects that, and if we have to exchange other lands to bring this back into the boundary, or am I mistaken?
Not that I'm aware of. So I can follow up with that question, but I don't know off the top of my head, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
My understanding is that it's separate from that. I don't know. Do you want to? You don't know? Okay. We'll let Ms. Fries check that for sure, though. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Then we'll call, unless you had something else, Deanne?
No, just that the consultant Amanda is also on the line, that she can provide some more additional information.
For sure. We've got Amanda Kozlowski from Armstrong Planning. Ms. Kozlowski, do you have a presentation for us or some comments?
I do. I'm just going to share my screen.
Okay.
Hopefully everyone can see that.
We can.
I'll take that. Okay, great. So good evening, Chair and members of Council. My name is Amanda Kozlowski, and like you said, I am with Armstrong Planning and Project Management. I'm here representing Riverland Area 2 GP Inc., known to most in the community and at City Hall or at Township Hall as Empire Communities. I'm here today in support of a recent official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision application that was submitted in support of the Riverland Area 2, what we call the Phase 5 lands. This is a separate subdivision, and as was mentioned by Councillor Shantz, these are lands that were recently brought into the regional boundary through ROPA 2 that was approved in 2018, went to the board and finalized in 2019. And so this one of the official plan amendment is to redesignate lands that are currently identified as rural into residential uses to reflect that regional approval. But I'll discuss that a little bit further in my report, or my presentation, sorry. This subdivision is essentially an extension of the existing Riverland subdivision in Bylaw. It's generally located in the southwest corner of Ottawa Street and Woolwich Street, and directly south of the new St. Boniface Catholic Elementary School that was recently built. So Phase 5 represents what is really the final phase of the Riverland subdivision that's been underdeveloped for a number of years. And it represents the complete build out of the community up to the future Ottawa Street extension, which is the settlement area boundary. Land uses that are proposed reflect what is approved in phases 1 to 4 and include a mix of residential typology, single detached townhouses, open space, and some park. And as mentioned above or previously, the school block. In our opinion, phase 5 as proposed represents a logical extension of the existing road network and allows for a full build out of the school. It protects and preserves certain wetlands within an open space block and also protects for the future westerly extension of Ottawa Street by incorporating a cul-de-sac at the end of what is currently identified as Street A, which is this on the page, it's the bottom street with the cul-de-sac. That actually limits density within on that street for all lands or all homes fronting onto that street. We're allowed a maximum of 26 lots or 26 homes fronting a dead end street. And that's why in this neighborhood, in this section of the plan, we've incorporated it slightly larger lots at 10.4 and 11.6 meter wide lots, whereas everywhere else we've tried to provide smaller lots to increase the affordability. As you can see, and this creates or allows for the extension of Andover Drive from the existing Riverland Area 2 subdivision to the future Ottawa Street extension. At this point, and as part of this proposal, Ottawa Street extension would be built out up to, but not past, Andover Drive. And that will, essentially, there's nowhere else for it to go. It's further, I always get my directions wrong, but beyond that is the Grand River. And so we know it's in the long-term plans for the region, but it's really long-term plans. So we're trying to protect for that as much as we can at this point. So in total, the proposed subdivision is as was mentioned before, 10.3 hectares. And if it's approved, it would allow for a maximum of up to 130 residential units. Based on the preliminary lotting, we think that the build out would result in a total of 122 units. And that's broken down to about 46 townhouses and 77 single detached units. This meets the provincial requirement and the regional requirement of 55 people and jobs per hectare. We're just sitting at about 55.45 people and jobs per hectare. The draft plan contemplates lots ranging in from 8.2 to 10.4 meters, primarily in what's the top end of the page, north of the environmental block, and larger 10.4 and 11.6 meter lots to the south, again, because of that Street A. The lands were part of, and as I mentioned before, the lands were part of the recent ROPA 2, which is the Regional Official Plan Amendment number 2 that brought in certain lands within the township urban area at a regional level. And so what we need to do now is reflect that at the township level in their documents and in your official plan. And so that is the intent of this official plan amendment. It would also redesignate the lands from what they are currently designated as, which is rural. And we would change them into residential neighborhoods and natural heritage framework to reflect an open space block centrally located. We would also update the land use plan to allow for the institutional use, which is the school block, the final piece of the school block that was recently constructed. Lanes would be identified as low, medium density residential and environmental protection. We'd also update, I think, the proposed collector street to show the Ottawa Street extension. One component of the subdivision that I have sort of briefly mentioned is the environmental lands. There's an environmental retention area that we're proposing within the subdivision. It is 3.5 hectares approximately, and it protects 5 existing wetlands. These wetlands have been staked, and recently, last week, were restaked with the GRCA and our ecologist from WSP. So what you see on this plan is a GRCA map that generally reflects the location of the wetlands. As I said, they have been restaked, and we'll be using the new boundaries to confirm the location of this plan. But from what I understand, not much has changed. The yellow represents a buffer, and so this block protects the wetlands and provides a substantial buffer to those. There are 2 additional wetlands on the south property line, and those will come out to facilitate the construction of the future Ottawa Street extension. And so what we're proposing is a detailed, quite a comprehensive restoration plan to offset the loss of those wetlands. The GRCA has already reviewed and has acknowledged that yes, they do need to come out in order to support the construction of the future Ottawa Street extension. Wetland 12, which is the wetland to the north, we have recently received a GRCA permit, and that's because we're trying to sort of speed up the school block lands to get some grass planted so that the kids can get out there and play no later than next spring. We've got some earthworks that need to be done and some time for growth and planting within that block, and so we've sort of advanced that through discussions with township staff and with the GRCA. So we were also requesting a zoning bylaw amendment, and that is essentially to bring what is now the agricultural zoning into a more into a more residential permissions. So the zoning bylaw amendment would create new residential, institutional, and open space zones as needed by the subdivision, and would create site-specific standards that better reflect the proposed development. Specifically here, we're proposing to zone residential lands R5A residential mixed high density with design guidelines, and that would support the single detached units that are ranging from 8.2 to 11.6 meter wide lots. And those of you who need it, it's about 27 feet to 38 feet. I believe that's the range in feet. The other residential zone we would propose is R7A residential multiple with design guidelines. And again, these zones represent what has been approved and is under construction in the Riverland Area 2 subdivision. In addition, there would be other open space zones to support the environmental protection block and the small park at the end of Street A. In support of these 3 applications, our team of consultants has completed a number of studies and reports building on previous submissions made in 2016 in support of the Riverland Area 2 subdivision approvals. We've completed traffic reports, environmental impact statement. We've reviewed the servicing availability of the area. We've also reviewed land use compatibility because we are aware of the industrial to the southeast of the site. And everything has come back in that there are no significant impacts that cannot be mitigated. So for example, noise has identified that traffic noise would create a requirement for upgraded windows, and that has all been incorporated in the reports and would be incorporated in any future approvals. So with that, if there are any questions, I would be more than happy to try and respond to them.
Okay, thank you. I ask you to stop screen sharing then. There we go. Thanks. Council questions? Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. Through you to the delegate, you talked about Ottawa Street extension, and at what point does that get built out, and how far do you go with that? Do you just take that to Woolwich Street, or does that go right out to Fountain Street during your build?
So through you, Madam Chair, the Ottawa Street extension component that would support the Riverland Phase 5 lands and even some of the Riverland Phase, the existing Riverland Area 2, would be built up to Woolwich Street and not beyond. There is an ongoing environmental assessment that the township is facilitating, I think, with a further extension towards Fountain Street, but that's not something that Empire would be involved in.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just I knew there was some environmental issues, and I didn't know that that was resolved yet or not. So thank you for that information. Also want to apologize to Ms. Fries for not giving her a heads up on that question.
Questions? Councillor Morahan.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Shantz, to the delegate. The property just behind the school is identified as wetlands, and you talked about speeding up some of the property enhancements, I guess, grass and such. Will it just be a like straight out grass when everything is ready, or will there be wetland components still left of that property when it's turned over to the school?
Through you, Madam Chair, the intent right now is we will be turning it over to the school as a graded, seated area. They plan to build parking lot and have it be playfield, so there will be no wetland left. The removal of that wetland has been incorporated into what we're planning or what we're working on right now with the GRCA and township staff and regional staff, and as part of our compensation plan and restoration plan of the existing wetlands, which aren't in great shape. Our plan is to improve, and as part of the GRCA permit that we received for that wetland, we have completed some of the transplantations and relocations that have to happen within certain seasons. And so we are working to do that, but no wetlands.
Okay, and then my other question would be on the open space with the other sides of the wetlands, would that be turned over to the township? And is that included as the 5% like park space, or would there be additional space included in this phase of the development?
So through you, Madam Chair, the Riverland subdivision includes Riverland Area 1, Area 2, and these phase 5 lands as part of an original conveyance of lands and parkland to the township back in, it could be as long as 2008, could be prior to that. All of the parkland has already been dedicated for these lands, and so there's no additional parkland being conveyed. The wetland block is being conveyed to the township, but it's being conveyed as open space block. There is a small, I'm just going to grab a plan, excuse me, a small park space. We've called it a Vista Park that's adjacent to the Street A cul-de-sac and the environmental enhancement block, which is the wetland block. And that is that Vista Park will also be transferred to the township. In addition, although it's not part of this subdivision application, as part of the phase 1 registration, we actually conveyed lands over and above the parkland requirement for the phase 5 lands, which is what results in there's a tiny notch missing from what is otherwise a nice rectangle. So it's hard to explain, but essentially the bottom line is that this phase 5 subdivision has overcompensated parkland and conveyed more than enough parkland than is required by the township.
Okay, thank you very much for your response.
Ms. Fries, did you want to add anything? I saw you turned your video on. No? Okay, just checking. I have a question about the wetlands too, if I could. And that is, they're adjacent to the road, to the Ottawa Street extension, and beyond that there are some ponds that came from the gravel pit and so on. Is there any intent to connect that wetland with other wetlands or other areas, or is that going to be self-contained? And the reason I'm asking is I know we're having issues in North Dumfries with turtle crossings and some of those things. So I'm wondering if there's any culverts or any thought given to connecting under Ottawa Street.
At this point in time, there is not any consideration because Ottawa Street won't extend in front of the wetland block. So it will essentially stop at Andover Drive, which is just before if I can share my screen again, it might help.
Would you please? Yeah, because I thought it was, I thought the wetland was below Andover.
It's just below Andover towards the riverside. So the Ottawa Street, there we go, now I can share. The Ottawa Street extension doesn't actually go that far. We'll find the best, there we go. So the Ottawa Street extension will come from the top of the page down towards Andover Drive and it will stop.
Okay, sorry, I'm looking from the bottom up.
Yeah. And so only if and when the bridge over the Grand River if that ever happens. If that design is contemplated, then Ottawa Street would be built out, is how I understand it, at least. There's no intent to build Ottawa Street between Andover and Street A, because there's just no need for it right now, and it could impact any future bridge design if that ever happens.
Okay, so then I'll ask the question this way. Are those wetlands that are on your property, are they connected to any other wetlands? They're not, so they're just self-contained.
Yeah, they're essentially, because this is an old gravel pit, they are, when we first walked the site, you can actually see bulldozer trails that are part of the wetland, and it's just low-lying areas. The water table in this area is quite high. And so these wetlands provide a recharge function. And so they continue to function just well. We'll have I think there's a third pipe proposed, so they will be sending clean water into these wetlands to make sure they stay wet. And it will help with the water balance on site, but there's no connection to any other wetlands on site, as far as I understand.
I was thinking off-site. So beyond your property, there are some ponds and so on. And so I just wondered if anyone took an overall view of that part of it.
The environmental impacts assessment does have to take a look at sort of the broader area, not just within the Phase 5 lands. The ponds to this, sort of it's really to the south, but to the right-hand side of the Ottawa Street extension, are part of the four-well pit. And I don't know that they would be considered as part of, like, as a wetland, because they're ponds related to the pit that still has an active license. And otherwise it's a little bit blurry. I call it the finger wetland that is right sort of central to the approved Riverland subdivision. That's another recharge area that has been transferred to the township, but there is no connection between the two.
Okay, thank you. Council, does anyone else have anything? Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Kozlowski. Sorry, I had a teacher in high school that was Kozlowski. Kozlowski?
Kozlowski, yeah, very close.
Okay. All right, thank you. You can turn your camera and video off.
Thank you very much.
Oh, and I'll ask the clerk if there are any unregistered participants in the meeting.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. There are no unregistered participants at tonight's meeting.
Okay, thank you. There being no further speakers, I declare the public meeting closed. Next on our agenda, we have a presentation, the Youth Impact Survey Geography Snapshot from the Children and Youth Planning Table of Waterloo Region. And we have Allison Pearson here, and I have some other names, Goranka Vukovic and Aiden Imran and Barb Cardo, who are all, is everyone here? Okay, well, welcome all of you, and you can start your presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mayor Shantz. I'm Barb Cardo, and I am a co-chair of the Children and Youth Planning Table. And I'm here with a couple of people from the Children and Youth Planning Table staff backbone team. I'm here with Allison Pearson. She's the manager of the team, and Adan Imran, who is one of our youth connectors. We're here because we have some data that we would like to share with you from young people in the community. Before I talk about that, though, I will say a few words about who we are as a planning table. So the Children and Youth Planning Table consists of over 60 organizations that sit around the table. We're not just any collaborative. We are the go-to group in Waterloo Region for system level youth and child well-being work. And our work spans across all cities and all townships. And any work that we do is with a pan-regional focus. Some of the member organizations that might be familiar to you are the Township of Woolwich is a member, as well as the 4 school boards and the YMCA of 3 Rivers. So who's involved? Well, there are 748 adults from across the community and over 300 young people participate. And together we are focused on impacting child and youth well-being. And now I'm going to hand it over to Allison, and she's going to tell you about what child and youth well-being means to us and about one of our projects, the Youth Impact Survey.
Thanks, Barb, and great to be here with all of you. I am Allison Pearson, she, her pronouns, and in manager seat with the Children and Youth Planning Table. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of grounding on what the Children and Youth Planning Table is. Barb mentioned we're focused on child and youth well-being. And when we talk about child and youth well-being, we're specifically talking about these 9 different domains. I'm guessing many of these jump to your mind if you were to think about things that impact the health and well-being of young people. And these are in alignment with UNICEF Canada. UNICEF Canada has done some great work with young people across the country, including young people in our community, to understand from them what really matters. And at the bottom there, you're going to see We Belong. And the members of the planning table believe belonging is foundational. The research would suggest that when good things are happening with belonging, you see good outcomes happening in other spaces as well. So being able to show up in spaces as you are, to be valued, heard, and included in the conversation in the community, where equity is considered and appreciated in the conversation. And so this project that we've been able to do over the last couple of years is called the Youth Impact Survey, and it's a chance to hear directly from young people ages 9 to 18 about their well-being. We were the first community in Canada to use this tool, and this last year we have heard from over 1,000 young folks across those 9 different domains that I spoke about. In a moment, Adan is going to share with you some local information about townships, but on a big picture, when we look across the 1,000, we see some concerning trends. So we see the well-being of young people suffering in several regards. We've got one bright spot, I would say, in this area of protectedness. So when young people talk about bullying, we see a slightly improved responses in 2021 compared to 2020. However, at the same time, we're seeing really concerning trends across other areas. So things like the daily stress levels that young people are under, self-reported mental health, civic engagement, and belonging continues to be about 20 points off of our pre-pandemic levels as a community. So the Youth Impact Survey is our chance to help share the voices and stories of young people in our community. And Adan is going to help you understand even more about what folks in Woolwich have been sharing.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you, Barb, for the introduction. And hello, everybody. My name is Adan, and I am one of the 3 youth connectors, part of the backbone team with the Children and Youth Planning Table. And my role as a youth connector was to help connect young people with this opportunity of the survey for their voices to be heard. It was so exciting to reach over 1,000 young people from across the region when we did this survey in 2021. So here's a quote from one of the 30 participants from Woolwich. COVID-19 and lockdowns have had a serious impact on my well-being. I feel very lonely and isolated majority of the time. So in total, we heard from about 103 young people across the 4 townships. This equaled about 11.4% of our sample size. So about 1 in 10 of our participants in total was from one of the townships. You'll receive a link from us to the full summary report of the Youth Impact Survey, as well as a report that has been disaggregated by geography. Today, I will share just a few slides that draw your attention to some of the information from young people in our townships. So on the slide, you'll be able to see one of the many domains we had questioned the youth about. They had the option to choose whether their sense of belonging was very weak, strong, or very strong. And we can see here that the sense of belonging was the highest for the young people in the townships. However, it is still important to note that about 1 in 4 young people in the townships, it was still weak. When it comes to self-assessed mental health in all communities, we see about half of the respondents struggling with their mental health. However, out of all the geographies, the participants from the townships were faring slightly better in terms of self-assessed mental health. So this question looks at hidden homelessness, experiences participants might have had, such as temporarily living with family or friends in their car. And although the lowest rate was in the townships at about 1 in 20 participants, we wanted to be sure to draw your attention to housing insecurity. So if you think about an average classroom, which is about 30 students, that could likely be the reality of a student in each classroom and in each school in your township. We also know since January of this year that our children and youth planning table organizations were reporting many increasing housing needs of families that they have served, which is concerning to many. So when asked about the personal responsibility to help protect the natural environment, we can see that 3 out of 4 of youth from the townships agree that this is part of their personal responsibility to take care of their natural environment. And when asked about the quality, the majority feel that the quality of the natural environment in their neighborhood is also very high. So finally, we come across to access of recreation and cultural facilities. So for the young people in the townships who participated in the survey, about 1 in 3 did not agree that the facilities are easy for them to get to. And when we had conducted the sense-making sessions about the Youth Impact Survey, things came up like the location or transportation and etc. So I feel grateful to be here today and bring forward some key insights related to belonging and mental health from young people directly to you. And while there are some high points in what young people shared, it's critical for all of us to grasp that many young people are still struggling with their well-being, and there are things that you can do to help. So a participant of the Youth Impact Survey had mentioned, actually use it. Don't just look at it as a theoretical thing you could do someday, actually do it. This is referring to the Youth Impact Survey data. And we see oftentimes that the bridge between adults and youth it's just getting bigger and bigger because of the lack of trust. Us youth feel that a lot of adults with authority are taking into consideration what youth have to say, but a lot of the times we don't see action actually going towards that. So as youth, we would love to work with adults and we would love to make change to make this entire generation better and put more youth voices more out there so it can be from both sides, adults and youth. So some calls to action. We are hoping that this data will become an important source of information to inform your decision making. And we also hope that you will think about ways to hear from youth on a regular basis. And finally, as we work with young people to identify meaningful actions for change, please, please, please be a part of actioning that work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adan. I apologize for mispronouncing your name at the beginning.
That's okay.
Thank you for time, and we are pleased to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Okay, Council, any questions? Councilor Merlehan?
Yeah, thank you. I guess anybody could answer this one. If you're one of us as a township councillor, you would look at that data and go, oh, wow, we're the townships. Our kids are doing much better than the kids in the school. We don't have to do anything. What would you say to that response?
Will I answer that?
Sure, it's open to anybody.
Sure. Through you, Mayor Shantz. Thank you for that question, Councillor Marilyn. I think what's important to keep in mind as we look at disaggregated data is we asked young people over 100 questions in this survey, and what we have summarized in our disaggregated briefs are 11 of those questions. So that's 11 questions where there look to be notable differences between geographies. Otherwise, we see a very similar picture across our community, regardless of the city or the townships that young people reside in. And as I mentioned at the midpoint of our presentation, the trends that we are seeing are headed in an unfavorable direction. So while the townships have some definite bright sparks, and I think that's a great learning opportunity, perhaps for the rest of the community on what might be going particularly well, or what might be contributing to higher senses of belonging or responsibility to the natural environment. On a whole, young people are struggling. So as much as you can work with young people in your community to understand more of the specifics around their struggles and their ideas for action, I would say all the better.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any words of wisdom, perhaps, if these decreases seem to be potentially related to COVID, to the pandemic? So as we're coming out the other side, we're looking at kind of a different landscape than when we went in. So do you have any words of wisdom for us in how we navigate this, especially with our youth?
You want me to take this, Allison? Sure. Okay. Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mayor Shantz, for the question. So I think what the Children and Youth Planning Table want to say is, we want to share the data. We want to make, communities aware of the trends. But this is just the first step. And so our best advice would be to find a way to work together with the youth in your community to do some sense making of the data at your community level. So, as you find ways to speak with youth in Woolwich, really looking into, what does this mean? What, when X% of folks are saying that they don't feel like they belong, or they feel like their mental health has declined, learn more about that and learn together, with youth about what might help to address what are some of the things that we might do as a community to improve those areas. Adan, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know you've taken part in some, as a youth yourself, taken part in some of those sense-making groups. Are you able to maybe give an example of what kind of things youth have come up with in those groups?
For sure, yeah. A lot of the things, to answer your question, Mayor Shantz, have been because of the pandemic. A lot of the youth's mental health has decreased, and they're just looking for opportunities to speak up more and provide more feedback. And I know from a lot of the sense-making sessions, a lot of it had to do with community centers and recreational buildings. So being able to put their voice out there and being able to have a say what is happening or decision making. A lot of the things that came up too was school boards. Oftentimes that we see school boards making decisions for anything that has to do with youth. It's mostly made by adults, and there is no youth on the school board committee. So starting new things that could be given to the school board to provide that youth insight for adults, I feel like would be the first step for sure. And I think of course, like it can always be built off that, but that's like the main foundation, being able to get youth voice heard, being able to get feedback from youth. So youth and adults are on the same page, and it's not just wondering like why youth prefer not to be with adults because of their comfort level and vice versa.
Appreciate that. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. It was great to hear from you, and thank you for all the work that you've done with the Children and Youth Planning Table too. I know you've done a lot of consultation with a lot of different people and groups and pulled a lot of data together, so we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Mayor Shantz. And if we can at all be of service, if there is more information that that you as a council might want from us, please feel free to reach out to any one of us, and we'd be glad to to help you if you are looking at doing any of your own work with youth.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, our next agenda item is delegations. And before we hear from the delegations, I want to read the following instructions. Please leave your video and microphone off until you are called on to speak. Each speaker has a maximum of 7 minutes. There will be a timer on the screen and you will hear a warning when you have 1 minute and when your time is up. Once you are finished, please turn your microphone and camera off again. You may listen into the rest of the meeting or leave when you want. Council will hear from all speakers. I think we just have one tonight, and ask questions of clarification. Council discussion and debate will start when all speakers on a topic have finished. So tonight we have Alan Marshall. So welcome, Mr. Marshall. Please turn your video and microphone on and begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. Good evening, Woolwich Council. My topic this evening is, and I'm trying to adjust the video. Well, there it is. My topic this evening is the Bolander Park landfill, 39 years of monitoring, sort of. Methane monitoring started in 1983 and continued for 2 years in a row. It started again in 1986 and went for another 2 years in a row. Monitoring then had a 7-year pause until 1994 when it ran for 1 year. It then started up again in 1996 for 1 year. Flash forward 11 years until 2007 when it then ran for 4 years in a row. After that, we had another pause, a 5-year pause until 2015. We then had 2 years of monitoring in a row from 2015 until 2016. Again, another 5-year hiatus occurred with new monitoring, methane monitoring last year in 2021, done by RJ Burnside and Associates. There was an active gas collection system installed in 1984 in the Bolander landfill, which likely ran effectively for at least 1 year, maybe longer. Certainly the 11 gas probes from this collection system that included a pump were working from 1984 until 1996. Some of these individual gas probes had high concentrations of methane gas, as indicated in the 5 calendar years that the probes were monitored, namely 1984, 86, 87, 1994, and 96. At that point, the 11-year pause took place from 96 until 2007. The reason I question whether the blower or pump was working properly is because even during the highest concentrations of methane at the individual gas probes, the pump measured 0% of methane by volume and air on 6 occasions between 1985 and 2007. The other 6 times that the gas probes were monitored and had methane in them, the blower or pump methane concentration was not measured. Therefore, other than the year the collection system was installed, 1984, and the pump measured 5% methane by volume and air, there hasn't been a single pump reading since indicating that any of the methane was actually being removed. I might also add that there hasn't been a single gas probe reading at any of the 11 gas probes comprising the gas collection system since 1996, 26 years ago. Nor have there been any readings at the initial 8 gas probes installed in 1983 for the last 26 years. Now, do keep in mind that 0 monitoring took place for the next 11 years, anywhere on the property, 96 to 2007. Unexplained, I might add. Also in 2007, there were a plethora of reasons given in the Conestoga Rovers and Associates reports on the Bolander landfill for the lack of readings, specifically including gas probes NF, not found, gas probes NMFL, not measured, flooded, gas probes NMBL, not measured, blocked. Gas probes NRNC, not reliable, no caps on probe, and just plain not measured. I repeat that these acronyms NF, NM, blocked, flooded, etc. are Conestoga Rovers designations and descriptions, not mine. To help replace these non-functioning gas probes, one new gas probe was installed in 1995. Unfortunately, its limited readings were listed as NMNIP, not measured, not installed properly. 4 more gas probes were installed in 2008 and a further 4 more in 2015. Both sets of new gas probes positioned 2 probes each at the east end of the Bolander landfill nearest High Street. For 2 of the next 3 years, very high methane readings were measured from the east end 2008 gas probes. Oddly, when monitoring resumed 5 years later, 3 of the 4 2008 gas probes were destroyed, and the 4th had readings twice of 0, twice not measured, and finally, NRMI, not reliable, malfunctioning instrument. Meanwhile, the 2 2015 installed gas probes at the west end of the property, that would be near the Palechi garage, had incredibly high and dangerous methane readings. Now we attend to the 5 gas probes installed in 2021, as well as a further reading taken from one of the West End 2015 installed gas probes. Incredibly, GP215, that the 15 refers to 2015, GP2 2015 had a reading of 73.8% methane concentration by volume in air, equal, and this is last year, equal to the highest concentrations ever found on the site back in the 1990s. 4 of the 5 2021 gas probes exceeded the lower explosive limit, the LEL, and the 5th exceeded 20% of the LEL, which is still considered potentially dangerous by authorities and experts. 2 of these 5 new gas probe concentrations could not be compared to earlier readings as none were located nearby. 2 with nearby probes exceeded their 2015 installed probe concentrations. Then, of course, we now have GHD's last 2 landfill reports, 2015 and 16, advising that a remedial action plan for methane control was necessary, as well as advising that a methane warning device had been reinstalled into the former Palechi garage. The 2021 report from RJ Burnside stated there are no methane issues on either the western or eastern part of the property that could negatively affect the proposed parking lot. Perhaps the real question should be, will the proposed parking lot, if accepted, negatively affect either future monitoring or a new methane collection system, whether passive or active? My last paragraph, I would characterize my experiences with past village councils on my last paragraph, last 5 lines, as unhelpful. That is unfortunate because maybe there are some facts or verifiable data that Woolwich could provide me with that would give me a different perspective versus the one I've had since 2015. That perspective is that Woolwich Township have not been following accepted best practices regarding dealing with methane gas at the Bolander landfill. Maybe you have a legitimate reason, but to date, I have not seen nor heard it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor, are there any questions for Mr. Marshall? Okay, seeing none, this is not something that's on our agenda tonight. So thank you, Mr. Marshall. If you can turn your video and microphone off.
Thank you. Shall do.
There is no staff report. Does council want to do anything with this, Councillor Shantz?
Yes, thank you. I just have a question, and I don't want to discount the research that Mr. Marshall brings to us. Other areas we have independent studies done, peer studies and things like that. And council has asked questions about this in the past, and I'm wondering if we should be looking into some further studies or what we should be doing going forward, because if this is made into a parking lot, I wonder if that affects anything with the fact that it might be more sealed off than open land. And I don't know it's not really a question. I just, maybe staff can comment. I don't know.
Sure. Mr. Poupey, are you available to comment on that?
I am here,
Or
yes.
Ms. Freeze? Deanne put her.
Yeah, I could probably stick handle it too with Deanne's support, I guess. So through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Shantz. Right now, the owner is in process. So that is still working itself out. So they have a proposal before us. There is a record of site that ultimately will need to be addressed, and they are monitoring on their site currently. So I think what we need to do is just wait for the information to unfold and have our reviewers, and there will be a report back to council at a future session seeking approval.
Okay, Ms. Freeze? Did you want to add anything to Jared's comments?
No, I think he explained it. So we came forward for a public meeting on April 25th, and we'll be coming back to council for a recommendation report. So I'll provide this to the planner on the file as well, so that they can include that as part of that report.
Okay, you kind of went garbled on us there, but I think you said you'd provide the information and have it included in the report. Yes. Councillor Shantz, is that a follow-up?
Yeah, if I could please, just wondering, these monitoring, it sounds like it's hit and miss or maybe just randomly done. And I know when we do monitoring for water levels and things like that, it's a graph that shows daily, sometimes hourly monitoring. Are these set up that way, or are they just monitored on a regular basis, a regular schedule? Or maybe you don't know that answer, and I apologize if you don't.
No, it's fine. Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Shantz. So appreciating there is a lot of history, and Mr. Marshall does address the history on the site to some degree. But there has been a change, obviously, with different owners. There was some issues with the past owner. This current owner is interested in doing remediation on site, so that's good news. In light of the previous owner, we were not permitted on site. So then we ended up with a process that looked to determine whether any methane was migrating off-site. And that's what we're in the process of finalizing right now, and we'll be submitting to the MECP. The MECP has been very involved with this process, with this new owner, with the township and everything that's happened. So there will be some monitoring reporting that's going to be coming out shortly as well. So I think the timing is good to start to put this one to bed, hopefully, and to see improvements on the site going forward.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Merlehan, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Mr. Poupey. I guess the takeaway I got from Mr. Marshall's president or delegation is, the history and the probes and such. Probably the information isn't all that reliable that we've had as the history of the property. So, it would lead you to maybe to believe that maybe some of the information coming forward on this is might need to be peer reviewed or have additional studies on the property just to make sure. Because I know when we were in 2015 or 2016 or something, when we talked about this as a council, and there were the fire department going in and installing methane indicators inside the building, and there was some concern there. And then, we weren't allowed on the property, nothing really happened. And then we have a report in here saying that, everything's all okay. So I think the takeaway maybe Mr. Marshall is trying to indicate is that, we haven't had maybe reliable information because of the nature of the probes and things like that over the years haven't worked for various reasons. Is that something you can comment on, and whether or not the township could peer review that or have additional studies?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Merlehan. I can't speak to the history or the rationale. I'm sure there is documentation from our consultant GHD who's been on the file for a number of years. I'm sure a lot of this has been addressed. All I can speak to is from when we were not allowed on site to our approach now as a township. we've taken a role to suggest that we don't really have an obligation on the property. So we do have some obligation to determine whether methane was migrating off site. To date, we haven't encountered that it is. We will be presenting reports shortly, but it's our understanding right now that there's nothing migrating offsite, and we have a willing owner now who is interested in remediating the property. I think that's the plus side as well for residents.
Okay, and just as a follow-up, if that's okay. So if the property owner, let's say, everything's all fine, and then whatever reason the water table is high, the methane comes up, which I think was one of the reasons told the council back in 2016 or something. Like what would the remediation look like then for removing methane, or however you deal with it, mitigate it?
I guess through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Merlehan, again, this was a delegation added, information's provided at the last minute, so I don't think I'm in a position to answer any detailed questions. I think that if council does want to provide some information back in response to Mr. Marshall, we would simply ask that Mr. Marshall provide us the questions he's seeking answers for, and then we can get some answers back to him and council if that's the direction council like to go.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Thanks.
Councillor McMillan, I saw something on that side of the screen. I wasn't sure if you raised your hand or not.
I did. I kind of have a question, but I don't want it answered tonight. I'm hoping that just if this is going to be an agenda item in the future, and I think it's important with what Mr. Poupe just said, that he's not able to answer detailed questions tonight. It's why we don't have things on the agenda. We don't discuss non-agenda items in a meeting like this, because it does put staff in a position where they're caught off guard. And I hope that if Mr. Marshall's still listening, he's not thinking that's a dodge or anything, that's a reason why we have this. But in the future, if this is an agenda item and it is discussed, that we could hear about things like what a property owner's responsibility is, and what would the level get to where they would have to have measuring on their property, and at what point would they be required to do remediation and things like that. When does the private interest get superseded by the public interest and things like that. I'm sure the Ministry of Environment has guidelines set up like that. So those types of educational things, because I'm sure there's people wondering, well, how does a private owner keep us from measuring that kind of stuff? And there could be some educational pieces there that would be beneficial if this did come up on an agenda in the future.
So Mr. Poupe or Ms. Fries, can you make sure that there's some kind of background information on how sites are monitored going forward, and who takes responsibility for certain types of cleanup and that kind of thing when the report comes?
Yes, and through Mayor Shantz to Councillor McMillan, I think that this process is part of that. There's a record of site condition required based on zoning and use of property. So that is a public process that does happen. And that's what we're into right now with this property. So that hasn't happened in previous ownerships. There hasn't been a desire to go through that process. So the township, I think, has gone above and beyond with looking to monitor external to site to provide that level of comfort. But this is a unique situation. There's no question about it. I wouldn't say this is the normal situation where the township's involved in a previous landfill and had the history that we have had in here. But absolutely, if council wants to unpack this particular property, I think there's something that can be done for that. But just want council to be aware that there is a public process still underway that will recommendation letter or a recommendation report will be flowing based on the current owner's proposal right now.
Okay, thank you. Anything else before we move on? Okay, thanks, Mr. Poupe. We have no unfinished business. We have a number of items on the consent agenda. Recommendations from the May 9th Committee of the Whole. We have correspondence and items for information. Would someone like to move? Councillor Merlehan, did you want to move it or did you want to pull something?
I could move it. I just need to take number 1 off because the patio seating, because I declared a conflict on that one last time.
So you want to move everything else then?
Sure.
Okay, let's do that. Councillor Shantz, yes. Seconding it?
No, I will second it eventually, but I would like to pull 2 of them out. The Grand River Transit one, the 12.1.2, and the correspondence, the wind turbine 12.2.1. If we could pull those out, I just have a couple of questions.
Okay, anything else to pull? Okay, so we'll take a motion on everything except 1, 12.1.2 and 12.2. All those seconder, Councillor McMillan, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, we'll do number 1 now if you want to turn your video off. The 2022 summer patio seating on Mill Street. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Redekop, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Welcome back. Councillor Shantz, Grand River Transit Shelter Easement Agreement.
Thank you. I just have one question with the location of this shelter, whether it's going to affect the left turn lane eventually when they redo Church and Arthur Street. If we have a backup, that's one question that I have. And the second question I have is, from time to time, buses stop and wait to go back, to get back on track as far as their timing goes. And I'm wondering if we can request that this location is not one of those where they stop and wait for 5 or 10 minutes, which could really cause a traffic issue.
Mr. Poupet, I think that would be for you.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Shantz. So it is in operation right now. It has been for some time. I'm not aware of any issues with that location. I know that for the bus, when it's parked there heading westbound, there is that left turn lane into what we'd call the Pride parking lot area. I suspect that when the bus is there, people are likely using that to skirt around the bus, is probably why we're not seeing any backup. But I haven't specifically had any complaints, or I'm not aware of any complaints regarding the bus stopping. I think it's a fairly quick stop. I don't think they're waiting for another bus to come and line up that cycle or that schedule. I think it's just that one bus route, and it just picks up and goes. I don't think there's a long delay there, and it certainly, I don't see it impacting at all the intersection of Arthur and Church Street.
Okay, if I could just ask a follow-up question. I'm thinking more when they redo that intersection, they're talking about having a longer left turn lane on Church to turn onto Arthur. And I'm wondering how far that is coming back and whether that will cause an issue.
Mm-hmm. And through you, Mayor Shantz, I haven't seen the design yet, but I don't believe it goes all the way back that far. I think that the storage lane is enough for a tractor trailer. I can't remember if we had agreed to 2 or 1, but the region was, I haven't seen, again, a detailed design yet, but something we can be aware of and make sure that it's not going to be an issue.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. And the wind turbine working group, Councillor Shantz, was that for Mr. Poupet or? No.
I'm not sure it was Mr. Poupet or maybe Deanne, I'm not sure. Question I have, is this for comment or is this just for suggestions, or what is the report for, or what is the correspondence for? Because my question is 2,000 kilometers from noise receptor, which is 2 kilometers away. And if that would get passed, would there be any place in the township that we could actually put one of these wind turbines?
So through you, Madam Mayor, there wouldn't be very much room, I think, if we allowed that distance. However, I don't think there's a lot of desire to establish wind turbines in the township because we're not close to water. We're not close to areas where there does generate high winds. However, I did take a quick look, and I'm not an expert on wind turbines in any sense, but I did take a look at what other municipalities are doing or other provinces are doing, as well as other countries are doing. And it ranges anywhere from 10 meters from public roads and 250 meters to residential, up to about 1,000 meters to residents. And that's about the highest that I've seen anywhere in Ontario, other provinces, and in other countries. So the highest I've seen is 1,000, and they're recommending 2,000. Again, I'm not an expert. I can't say what the appropriate amount is. This just would be more than anywhere else that I have found.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know whether we were supposed to respond to that or not. So anyway, that's all.
Madam Mayor, if there was direction from council to include a minimum distance in our zoning bylaw, we could include that in the next round of the zoning bylaw.
Okay, thank you. Anything else before we take a motion on those two items? Someone like to move those two? Councillor Shantz, seconded by Councillor McMillan. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Staff reports. We'll start with Mr. Petherick to give us our Q1 quarterly report. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So hard to believe we're actually almost halfway through the second quarter of the year. So 2022 is humming along quite quickly. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending how you look at it, but we're here to talk about the first quarter. So looking at our financial statements, with 25% of the year gone at the end of the first quarter, we're sitting at a slight surplus position at about 0.08%. That translates, as I said, into just a very small under $10,000 surplus. If we look at where we were this time last year, we were in a same operating positive operating variance about 1.35%. So we're a little behind where we were last year. However, the two things that I want to talk about for this year, and it is contained in the report. The first one is with our rec facility. So COVID is still with us. It's still here, but we really have to remember going back to the beginning of the year where we had our rec facilities closed down. So I know that was causing a bit of concern of what that was going to do to the revenue. But since they reopened, they were actually coming back, and the revenues really came back quite steadily. Even to the point that we're $400,000 higher than we were this time last year. So they are recovering quite well. The other side of it is, and this is on the expenditure side, you can see that the winter control budget is primarily spent out already this year. We had a very tough winter. Which didn't really bode well for that budget area. So I can say, as we get into the 22-23 winter season, I will lay the bets that we are going to be in a deficit position in this area for sure. And of course, I think from that, from a staff perspective, we'll have to kind of contain that and be very mindful about that as we move forward into 2022. From the water and wastewater perspective, a slight deficit in the wastewater area, even a little bit larger of a deficit in the water, just shy of $40,000. But as the report indicates, this is the first quarter, so there's a lot of fluctuations that happen, especially at the beginning of the year as we get into the regional billings as well as our billings to kind of start to match some stuff up. I think by the time we get into the end of the second and into the third, we start to see that trend of where we're going to probably end up by the end of the year. So right now, not really too much to say for any of those areas. And of course, with capital being the first quarter, we've had a lot of activity come to council with regards to RFPs and tenders, but we're just really starting our projects this year. So at this point, not really much to say from the capital budget perspective, but myself and staff are here to answer any questions that council may have.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Councillor Merlihan.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Shantz, through you to Mr. Petherick. I was wondering if you could give us an update on where we're at with installing the wireless billing things for the water. I forget what that's called, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yep, it's the radio technology for the water meters. So we are well into Myra. I believe the last I heard that we should be on track to finish at least that initial installation stage somewhere in the June, July period is what I'm hearing. There are several that we have to go back, and they're actually starting to reach out to, or about to reach out to, the residents that for a variety of reasons, there could be something wrong with the wiring, or there's something wrong with the water meter itself, that we actually have to go back and actually make appointments with those residents to actually get into the facility and actually take an investigation, and more than likely we'll have to replace the water meter. So that's going to be happening very shortly as well. But we are on track to hopefully by the middle of this year get that program going. If council recalls, we actually did sign the agreement with Water North Hydro. So now we're in the process of talking to KTI, that's our contractor, to get access to the census. It's called the Census Analytics, and that is the software program behind it that actually is going to allow us to pull the data in, and we can kind of convert it into what we need to do to be able to upload it into our financial system. So we are getting to the hopefully end stages of that, which is really good to see.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for the update.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Petherick. That was pretty much a good news, at least till we get to next December report. Thanks. Next, we have a verbal update on the regional official plan review. Ms. Freeze, you're up again.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to give council an update that we are planning on coming to council with the report on June 6th about the options, staff's recommendation for which growth option that was based on the options that were presented by the region in the all council meeting. And we'll also be recommending which lands would be included through the option that we're recommending. So there's a notice that's going to be going out in the paper today. So I just wanted to give council a heads up that that report's coming, and that will also generate some delegations at the meeting on June 6th.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Freeze? Okay, thanks. We'll look forward to that report then. Thanks. Tender award for the 2022 surface treatment program, Mr. Poupé.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz, and through you to members of council. We have our annual surface treatment program tender award again this year, and we are looking to seek approval to award the program this year to Duncor Enterprises Incorporated at a total cost of just south of $180,000 with HST rebate. We are very happy with Duncor. They performed very well for the township, and we're glad to be working with them again this year. They were the contractor who did the conversion roads last year, and we will be looking to put our final lift on Guelphtown line, Lurch and Fife this year. The unfortunate part for us, and this was a learning year for staff, this was our first year of taking over the state of the infrastructure with respect to roads. So we have done our inspections of all our gravel road network. And we unfortunately had some breakups on Guelphtown line, Fife and Lurch. They were fairly significant. And it's unfortunate, but I think that we learned a lot this year going through that process and have a better, I'd say, handle on converting roads going forward. So what we have found is that there was a lot of areas with trapped water. The problem with gravel roads, and I don't think this should be lost on anybody here, is gravel roads are probably our most complicated road network. It seems simple. Everybody thinks roads are easy. They may be easy, but gravel roads are very complex because nobody really knows how they were constructed, widened out, what water is happening. And we've seen our gravel roads over the years, and at different times they reveal different things to us. So we have made a concerted effort now to link engineering and operations. That's been happening for the last couple of years. And we have a plan going forward that we're looking to just roll out right now, seeking contractor support. We've identified that in the financial comments. to the tune of about 80,000 to repair. Now, this is what I think council has heard many times from staff. Drainage is the single most important part of a road network and protecting it. And that is exactly what we're experiencing. We need to get water that has been trapped in a number of locations. Water has moved because of some of the work we've done. So that's what we're looking to do. We have a solution. We're going to be putting some subdrain beneath our roads in problem areas with proper outlets to ditches. And then we will replace the gravel and get surface treat back on, and then do a holistic approach on top to seal them up. And we feel strongly that that should work. We have spoken with our neighbor, Guelph Aramosa. They're aware, and we are proceeding with their knowledge and their support financially as well to make those repairs. So I just wanted council to be aware. It is unfortunate, but again, it was training for staff. We wouldn't expect ourselves to be in the similar place. With the remaining dollars left over, which will be about 37,000, we're looking to apply that to the other two roadways that we need to convert out in the southwest area of Township in Ryder and Vance. So we will be focused with that monies on some graveling, but more importantly, drainage. And I think it's important as well, council, to understand one of the big takeaways was addressing the drainage, but then also addressing the gravel piece with an appropriate layer of gravel, as well as applying that surface treatment that very same year. One of the things we found was the contamination from a lot of the rural farmlands going onto that gravel, and then us surface treating later does cause some problems because you've mixed in now deleterious material from surrounding fields, and now we're capping that, and that just that has popped off at another number of locations. So there's twofold really. There is the protection of that gravel layer with a hard top as quickly as possible, and addressing the underlying drainage issues as we're aware. So I think with that going forward, we'll have a better handle on converting Ryder and Vance, and ultimately some of our other gravel roads as we go forward. And with that long-winded explanation, I would be happy to answer any questions council may have.
Okay, are there any questions? Councillor Shantz.
Thank you, through you to Mr. Poupé. I know we've done boreholes and such in the past on gravel roads. Is that how we would determine how the drainage is, or how do we determine that?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Shantz. So that'll give us some idea of what's in the ground in locations. Falling weight deflectometer is another good approach, which will give you the structural adequacy of the road at a snapshot in time. So really with the drainages, we need to visit and see those roads in the spring and fall. And we need to have a good understanding of some of the deficiencies, because, excuse me, one of the things we realized was we had a water problem on Lurch, and we essentially moved it to the low spot. Of course, magically water goes downhill, but it was fairly high up in the hills. There's always that saying, Jack and Jill went up the hill to get a pail of water. So people would always think water sitting in the low spots, not always. So we had actually moved the water, continually moved it down to the corner in this instance. So I think with respect to drainage, we just need eyes on sections of road that we're going to convert at least 2 years out, and just watch it over different winters, because that's the other part of this. We had a really difficult winter. Frost set in, stayed in. And then when it did come out, it had a lot of wet weather. So it was exacerbated some of our problem areas. And we saw that with all the potholes that mostly everybody's dealing with now as well. It was a bad year for that. So I think that's the repeated cycle we need to understand regarding drainage. And of course, the boreholes play into understanding how it was constructed at certain locations, and falling weight helps with the structural adequacy of the road itself.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. I like that you're using your eyes to look at it. Modeling is always great, but there's nothing like seeing for yourself. So thanks for that. Any other questions? All right, there is a motion here. Would someone like to move it to accept the tender award? Councillor Shantz, and seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Poupé. Mayor's report. I guess what I want to bring to your attention this evening is that we are having a public meeting at the region on Wednesday from 3 until, it's scheduled from 3 until 7. It'll be 3 until we've heard from everyone, I guess. It's a public meeting on the regional official plan draft land needs assessment, and that's taking it's looking at different densities and then deciding how much land we need to make it to 2051 based on our population projections. That you can find that report on the regional website. If you go into the regional Waterloo and go under council and meetings and put in May 18th, you should get that report if you're interested. And if you're interested in taking the meeting in, I expect there would be a link probably on that report as well. I didn't check where that was, but I know I'm getting a lot of emails from people on it, so I know there's interest out there. Any council reports and updates? No? Outstanding activity list. Anyone have anything on that? Okay, seeing nothing, we have no notice of motion. We need a motion that the following bylaws in the hands of the clerk be read a first, second, third time and finally passed, and that they be numbered as bylaw number 31-2022 to 35-2022, and that they be signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with the corporate seal. Actually, you can see those there. I have a conflict on the first one. I'll ask the clerk how I should handle that. Sorry, I didn't catch that earlier.
That's okay, Mayor Shantz, through you. If you wish, you can ask another member of council to chair this portion of the meeting if you have a conflict with one of the bylaws.
Okay, who's the acting mayor?
The acting mayor is Councillor Martin.
Councillor Martin, can I get you to chair? Here, I'll give you the wording.
Okay, a bylaw to further amend zoning, bylaw 55-86 of the Township of Woolwich, that it be Raymond Kuntz Haulage Limited. A bylaw to exempt certain blocks from part lot control lot 73 plan 58M661 Emerald Homes. Being a bylaw to dedicate certain lands within the Township of Woolwich as part of a public highway. These on the back too. A bylaw to authorize the execution of an easement agreement for a bus shelter for lands known at municipality as 24 Church Street, West Elmira. A bylaw to confirm all actions and proceedings of the council, May the 16th, 2022. Somebody prepared to move that, please? Councilor Redekop and Councilor McMillan. Any discussion? I'll call a question. All those in favor? And that's carried.
Just in time to ask for adjournment. Would someone like to move adjournment? Councillor McMillan, Councillor Shantz, all those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. We'll meet again in regular session on Monday, June 6th, 2022. And council thanks all who participated or tuned into the meeting tonight on our YouTube live stream. And I will remind council to stay connected until we receive confirmation that the live stream has stopped. Good night, everyone.